Christina continues to serve on the board of directors of the American College for Vedic Astrology and as faculty for both ACFA and as a Vedic webinar presenter, such as we're doing today with ACFA Online. And she also has contributed to ACFA and SIVA as faculty at conferences and symposiums worldwide. She's also working as a tutor for Vedic astrology. She's qualified to teach students at all levels. Christina Collins is also a former editor of the ACFA News. She's president of Celestial Resource, the timing coach, and editor-in-chief of the Jyotish Star, which you can contact at jyotishstar.com. It's the first American online publication or e-magazine for Jyotish and Vedic astrology, which promotes the knowledge and the stars, or celebrities we might say, in the field of Vedic astrology, both in the U.S. and worldwide. Christina's website is ChristinaCollinsAstrology.com. She can also be reached at jyotish@indra.com, and she can be reached by phone by 303-665-9996. So So now I'm going to pass the presentation over to Christina Collins on Jupiter and Saturn transits, and Christina will continue, and then at the end we'll take questions. So Christina, we're making you the presenter.
Okay, I will show my screen. Thank you. Did that work?
Yeah, if you want to put it in presentation mode.
Right, and at the end we'll take the questions, but in the meantime, if everybody could type their questions in the chat box as we go, then Angela will collect them and feed questions to me at the end. And welcome everybody. It's so lovely to be here. I'm going to slide my panel over there so you can see. So today we're going to talk about the mutual transits of Saturn, Shani, and Jupiter, Guru. So Jupiter and Saturn, when they're in mutual transit, that means what house do they both aspect at any given time. And then we'll be also talking about Ashtaka Varga and Bin Ashtaka Varga, which is a point system. So our first topic, we'll be looking at Jupiter and Saturn over an individual's chart, over a country's or a nation's chart, and over a nation's new moon in Pisces or the Varshapal chart. That's the annual chart every year. The Jupiter-Saturn transit and Ashtaka Varga points in the country chart. And then we'll add the impact of Rahu and Ketu, the current karma in motion. Karma is the law of action. What goes out returns. Then we'll look at Saturn and Sadhisati and the Ashtaka Varga and the Bin Ashtaka Varga points, so that you can see which of the 2.5 years of the 7.5 year transit of Saturn, called Sadhisati, which will be the most challenging years. So just to go over some Jyotish terms for anybody that's new, probably most of the people that found out about this know a little bit about Vedic astrology already. But the natal chart or Rasi chart is the main chart, and it's the map of the heavens at the exact moment of birth or origination of an idea or an event like in mundane astrology. Ashtaka Varga is the house strength number. So 25 is average, and each added or subtracted point, it's quantum in character. Shadbala is planetary strength. So 1.0 means 100% and stable. 1.10 and up increases the strength of a planet. Less than 1.0 or 100% weakens the planet. So Ashtaka Varga's house strength, Shadbala is planetary strength. And Rahu and Ketu are not included in Ashtaka Varga or Shadbala because they don't own houses. But the lords of their houses, lords of the sign they're in, during their time periods are what you should look for as strength for either Rahu or Ketu in their time periods, or Vimshodari Dasha. I'm going to clip along here at a fast speed because we have 27 slides today. If I'm going too fast, somebody pop in and tell me. So Ashtaka means 8, Varga means divisions. So Ashtaka Varga measures a planet's strength from every planet, not just from the moon, as in Gochara, which means following the moon, which is what we call the transits. A planet is transiting so far from the moon. In Ashtakavarga, we measure from every planet. So if you learn Ashtakavarga, you can make very accurate predictions using it for transits, not deleting your moon Gochara, but as an adjunct. So when any planet transits a sign with low points in Ashtakavarga, less than 4, it won't give as good results. If it's transiting like 7 points, 6, 7 points, then it'll get better results. Saturn and Jupiter are good transiting a house with very high Ashtakavarga points. Now, points are bindus. So Sarva Ashtakavarga determines the strength of a planet by high or low bindus. Sarva means the sum total of all the others. So bindu is a point, like a drop of rain, or like the bindi that you wear on the third eye in India, the red bindi, it's a point. So where Kuta, you hear about the Kuta points, that's a point like the point of a mountain that's used in compatibility matching. So there's a difference in the two kinds of points. So at least 25 is good, the more the better. 48 is as high as it gets, actually 49 for Mars. And you note the highest and the lowest points in the chart. So you'll go around and look at the accumulated Sarva Ashtakavarga points in your chart to see which house and sign has the lowest points and which has the highest. Rahu and Ketu don't have the separate consideration because they're upagrahas. Upagraha means shadow grabber or shadow planets. Ashtakavarga is the point system, all the others, that determines which planets give the points to add up to the Ashtakavarga points for strength. So that's a subsystem. I'll show it to you in a minute when we look at charts. Shadbala is a percentage system that determines the strength of a house. So planets aspect from their house position. All planets aspect from their house of position. That's the first house. All planets aspect by opposition. That's house 7, diagonally opposite. So Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Rahu, and Ketu have a special set of additional aspects besides 1 and 7. Jupiter aspects 5 and 9, so that's houses 1, 5, 7, and 9 from its position. Saturn aspects houses 3 and 10, that's 1, 3, 7, and 10 from its position. Mars aspects 4 and 8, that's 1, 4, 7, and 8. And Rahu and Ketu aspect like Jupiter, 1, 5, 7, and 9. So I'm just explaining what our terminology is. And so the 2015 annual Varshapal chart, or new moon in Pisces, happens every year when the new moon, Pisces and the sun are the same degree. And you erect the chart for the location of a country's capital city, which gives you the rising sign and tells which houses hold the planets for that year for that specific country. We're going to be looking at the USA Varshapal chart. It's used for mundane prediction along with the chart of the country and the chart of the country's ruler, leader, king, president. It also can be applied to an individual's birth chart to observe the lagna of the country chart that they're living in and what house number that is for the individual. USA 2015, the lagna is Capricorn, so you observe that sign from the rising lagna while also observing the moon, Chandra lagna, and sun rising, Surya lagna, which both will always be Pisces when the sun and moon are in the same degree for this chart. Okay, this is our first chart. I hope everybody can see this, okay? This is the Varsh chart for this year for the USA. So you look at Capricorn is the rising sign. That puts, and you look at the points here, Samudaya, Ashtakavarga in the bottom right-hand corner. So you see the rising sign is very, very high points. The first house is high, the country self, 38 points. The 11th house, the lord of the first house is Saturn. Saturn has gone to house 11. It also is very high with 30 points. The 4th house is fixed assets, and the Yogakaraka Venus is in the house, and it is a Raja Yoga house, lord of the 5th in the 4th, and it's the Yogakaraka or planet of power for the house. So Venus is very, very strong, and it has, count them, 30 points in Ashtakavarga. Now you only need 25 points for strength, and these are quantum points like an earthquake, so that's very, very, very good. Now the 7th house and the 8th house are the two lowest house. So the 7th is a house of partnership, the 8th house of unearned wealth. So when you see something like that, the two low points are 23, then you see that income may not come from other countries. When you're looking at a country chart, the 8th house is the income from another country. And the current transiting Jupiter and Saturn mutually aspect this house now that Jupiter is here in Leo. When the Varshapal chart happened, so that gives you the trend for the whole year, Jupiter was exalted aspecting Saturn in the 11th house with 30 points. So you see that the U.S. chart is very, very strong. It does not show a lot of income coming from other countries. So even though we've just had an Iran deal, and I've got Iran's chart at the end, and you'll see how good that is, I still think that we'll have plenty of cash flow in the United States. It'll be a financially good year for the U.S. So I'm hoping you see how we do that. And then you bring the Dasha in, and the Dasha was Saturn, Jupiter. So that's very powerful that both Saturn and Jupiter were mutually aspecting the 11th house of cash flow with 30 points. I have it down here at the bottom, 30 or 30 right here. And Saturn is Lord of the Lagna. And Jupiter and Saturn were both mutually aspecting the ascendant as well. Exalted Jupiter by its opposition aspect, Saturn by its third aspect. Very, very powerful chart for the USA. So to give a reiteration, so Capricorn is the first house for the U.S. There's 38 points in the first. It can go as far as 49. What sign does Jupiter and Saturn mutually aspect? Right now it's Leo. It was the Lagna in the 11th house for the Varsh. How many points in Leo for the USA chart? 23. What house is that for the USA chart? 8. The house of unearned wealth or money from other countries. How strong is the ruler of the Lagna, and how many points in Ashtaka Varga? Saturn in the 11th house with 30 points. Saturn in Scorpio ruled by Mars. Mars and Saturn both the strongest planets in Shadbala. See? Shadbala, strength of a planet. Mars is 169 points. Saturn is 169. So the ruler of the 11th house, Mars, is very, very powerful as well in Shadbala. The lowest house is 7 and house 8 with 23. The house of partnership and the house of income from others. Okay, now then what happened on July 13th, Jupiter moved. So now instead of Jupiter and Saturn both aspecting Scorpio and Capricorn, we have a situation where Saturn throws its 10th aspect on Jupiter and has lost its benefic exalted Jupiter aspect. So Saturn becomes a little more ornery when that happens. And as soon as it happened, on the actual day it went retrograde, oil prices went up. Saturn rules oil. Then as soon as Jupiter moved here, the actual day that Jupiter moved was the day that Obama signed with Iran the treaty with Iran to open up trade again. So that slowed oil here in this country. Next January, we'll have another chart. Rahu will move in with Jupiter, and that's going to make this all very, very different. It will be positive. Kodanda Rahu, big Rahu, it means expanded. It's a material yoga for material gains more than a spiritual yoga. So right this minute, Saturn and Jupiter mutually aspect the sign of Leo. Now, it's not always two signs that are being mutually aspected. Sometimes it's one. So Saturn aspects Leo by its 10th aspect, and Jupiter aspects Leo from position. So here you see it. It is. And I apologize for those that read in North Indian because I set this up for South, but you can set it up yourself for North. So here you see Jupiter is posited here, and Saturn is in Leo. Saturn is posited in Scorpio. Saturn throws its 10th aspect on Leo. Jupiter is positional aspect. And I went ahead and you can see Saturn opposition, but no, Jupiter doesn't aspect here. Jupiter's 5th and 9th aspects, but no Saturn aspect. Jupiter's opposition, but no Saturn aspect. So you can see this is the one house in play right now. Now, this is a chart of Wayne Dyer, and we're not going to delineate his whole chart today. Everybody probably knows that he has passed on. And I just wanted to illustrate in an individual's chart just the mutual aspect of Jupiter and Saturn. So Jupiter and Saturn, this is the chart of his passing. And they know he passed after he went to sleep after 11 or into the early hours the next morning, but they're all saying that it was Saturday night late. And so I used 2233 because it worked to me with rectification of his chart. If you look at the Jupiter in his 6th house, he was Pisces rising, Leo was his 6th house, Jupiter was transiting the 6th, Saturn was transiting in Scorpio, aspecting his 6th. For Pisces rising, Leo, which rules the lumbar spine, the lower back, and the 6th house of accidents, and the 6th house of serving the Dharma, because it's always 10th from the 9th. The heart, Leo rules the heart. Now, it could have been that he had an accident and hurt his lower back, so why was it death instead of that? And it's because of the transit of Saturn in the 7th house from the moon. And the dasha, K2, dasha, and Mars. Mars is very, very quick, and he had a quick passing. So if you see, he has only 19 points in the house with the moon. That's the lowest house for Ashtaka Varga. The transiting Saturn, while not in the same degree as the moon, was still in the 7th house Marika from the moon. 7th house is a Marika, it means death house, because it is the 2nd and the 3rd are Marika. So from the moon, the 2nd house is a Marika, and this is the 7th house Marika, because it's 12th from the 8th, or loss of life. And that Saturn transit, now we'll take a look at the Ashtaka Varga. Now this has been Ashtaka Varga. So you see in the bottom right-hand corner is Samudaya Ashtaka Varga. So you have, you can see the points. 19 is the lowest house, and that's where his moon is. And so then you can see who threw the points, because you can add these up. You know, so if you add up 4 and 2, 6, and 2, 8, plus 1 is 9, plus 3 is 12, 15, 19. You don't add up the points in the logna. So you see that's who threw the points. You see, did friends throw the points? Well, Jupiter's neutral, 3. Venus is a friend, 3. Mercury's a friend, only 1. Mars is an enemy, 2. Moon has no enemies, but is an enemy to Venus, so that's an enemy, and the Sun is an enemy to Venus. So you can see the highest points were thrown by the Sun in Vinashaka Varga, adding up to these points, and the Sun is who rules his 6th house. You know, so the Sun was also transiting in Leo when he passed. This system, once you really get it down, is very, very cool. And then you look at the points in the moon. Okay, well, the moon has 2 points in Vinashtaka Varga. And the whole point is, now Saturn is aspecting the moon here. So you go and look to see how many points does Saturn have in Taurus, where the moon has 2. Well, Saturn has 4, so Saturn wins. You see? And if you take it like Sati Sati, which we'll do with the next one when we look at Marilyn Monroe's chart. So the Ashtaka Varga points, Scorpio, the house where Saturn is transiting, has 4 points in Vinashtaka Varga. So were the moon there with 5 points, then the moon would have won. Saturn was in the 7th Marka house from the moon in Taurus. The moon in Taurus has only 2 points. This is not strong enough to withstand the onslaught of Saturn's aspect, who has 2 points more, or 4. Mars, the ruler of Scorpio, has only 2 points out of 8 possible in Ashtaka Varga. oops, sorry, 4 points and above indicate strength. He died in Mercury Dasha. That is Sun Vimshodari. Since Sun is the house being transited, Leo's house by Jupiter and Saturn, I also look at the Ashtaka Varga of the Sun, Surya Ashtaka Varga, instead of just the Moon's Ashtaka Varga. And so that was Mercury Dasha. That has 5 points in Aries and Vinashtaka Varga. The transiting Mercury was in the 7th in America house with only 23 points, and he died in the Dasha of Jupiter, Jupiter-Mars. That's the Surya Dasha. Jupiter was transiting in his 6th house along with the aspect of Saturn, the house Leo receiving the mutual aspect of Jupiter and Saturn. Leo rules the heart. The 6th is the house of health and accidents, and he died of a heart attack. He did have leukemia, but the coroner's report was that there was absolutely no trace of leukemia in him at all, and that they ruled it a heart attack. Now, this is the United States chart. You think about, this is the USA chart, this is the Kelleher chart. There are 2 charts in use pretty much by Vedic astrologers. One is Scorpio rising, one is Sag rising. I like Sag rising. To me, it makes sense. I also respect James Kelleher's research to come up with this chart, and we are known as the land of freedom, and Sagittarius is a sign of freedom. It makes total sense to me. Some of you may disagree with me. But now you look, we know the Varshapal chart for the United States is Capricorn rising, where the United States Ketu is, which is the karma of the country. And so you look at the mutual aspect of Jupiter and Saturn, and it's falling on the 9th house for the United States, which is very strong for the Dharma of the U.S. However, look at the points for that house in Ashtaka Varga. It's low, it's 16. And we've had a lot of wars we've been involved with, where there are many countries out there that have had minimal wars compared to the USA. You look at the fixed assets of the country, 43, that's very powerful. Very, very powerful. And you look at the service, the 30 points, how it serves the Dharma. Now what will happen later on when Jupiter moves to Virgo in 2016 and Saturn is still here, then then the mutual house that Saturn and Jupiter both aspect will be different. We'll come to that again in a minute. So the USA is in the Rahu Dasha right now, Jupiter subperiod. And the Lord of the Lagna, Sagittarius ruled by Jupiter, is transiting the 9th house of Dharma, and it is aspecting the 1st house and the 5th house. I called that the 4th a minute ago. I meant 4th from the karma. But the 5th house, Aries, has 43 points. So this is very, 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 very good transit of Jupiter that we're having right now for the USA, just in general. Better in a way than when Jupiter was transiting the 8th house, which is a mixed bag, house of other unearned wealth, but it's also the house of misery. So I think things are better now and getting better. The Jupiter just barely moved. This is the chart of Iran. We'll talk about the Iran treaty that happened. Look at this. Iran is in Moon Dasha, over here, Moon Mercury. Moon is in the 10th house. This house, Leo, is receiving the mutual aspect of Jupiter and Saturn. And so this house is very strong. This 10th house is very strong for Iran. It has 29 points in Ashtaka Varga. So the Jupiter exalted in the chart of Iran, but it's in a house with only 20 points. So as soon as Jupiter moves to a stronger position for the Scorpio rising chart, where it aspects the Moon, the Saturn, the Rahu, and the Sun, the Ketu, and the Mars, and the 2nd house of earning, and the Saturn doesn't, I'm just doing the Jupiter, and Jupiter aspects the 6th house of service, serving the Dharma. Things are looking up for the Iran chart. Now, to review a little bit, the house that has the lowest score is the weakest. Anything under 25 points is weak. 25 to about 28 points is medium. More than 28 points is considered strong. And the house that has the highest points is the strongest. These are quantum, like the points in the Richter scale for earthquakes. A 4 is much bigger than a 5, and a 6 is much bigger than a 5. And 7 makes international news. And when you add each house's points, by the way, in the Sarvasaka Varga, it should always add up to 337. So if you're calculating it by hand, you want to check that, make sure your calculations are right. If you're using a computer program, you want to check that and make sure the computer program is right. So you add up each of these points in the Samudaya Ashtaka Varga, not the Bin Ashtaka Varga, and the sum of those points should be 337. Now, if the number of the first house is lower than 25, it means that working with others will help meet the life goals. If the number of the first house is very low, it means that the health of the person may not be strong enough to live up to the Raja Yogas and blessings of the destiny of a chart. This is where remediation comes in, remedial measures, remedies, gemstones, mantra meditation, karma yoga, helping others to strengthen the first house. So in other words, if you have low points in the first house, you may be too sick to go out and do the things you have to do to manifest the Dharma. Even if there are lots of Raja Yogas and power placements in your chart, you still may need to have the assistance of another, going to business with somebody else instead of by yourself, somebody with high points in the first house. So strength, weak, less than 25 points. The highest points is the strongest house. Medium, 24 to 28. The points added up from all the houses should always equal 337. And strong is 28 points or more. So the Lagna points must be strong, or remedies in partnership are needed. Now here's Marilyn Monroe's chart. And I know we're getting close to running out of time. How are we, Bill?
I think maybe 5 more minutes if you can fit that in.
Okay, I can do this. Okay, so Marilyn Monroe, she died in Sati Sati. So she had Cancer rising with the moon here in Capricorn, Dhanishta. Okay, so she died from an overdose of morphine, or even if some people say she was murdered, all kinds of stories. Either way, it was her time if you look at the transits to the chart. At the time of her passing, Saturn was at 14 retrograde in its own sign in Capricorn, and Rahu and Ketu were both aspecting the sign. She died on August 5th, 1962 at 23:30. At 11 o'clock that night, she called someone and said she thought she'd taken too much medication. And that's the last anybody heard of her, and then she was found at 3 in the morning, already gone. So I used 30 minutes after that phone call. It could have been that it was Taurus rising. So Jupiter at the time she was having a Jupiter return. Jupiter is a mark. It's not a good planet for a Capricorn rising moon here. And she had Saturn transiting. Now, Sati Sati is when Saturn transits the 12th from the moon, the house of the moon, and the house after the moon. It takes approximately 2.5 years to go through, and Sati Sati literally translated means 7.5 years. So you look at the Binashtaka Varga points, and I just grabbed this one out of the sky last night too, because I forgot to explain this example when I wrote the rest of this. So here's the moon's Ashtaka Varga, the Binashtaka Varga for the moon. So you look at the moon, it has 3 points. In the 12th house from the moon are 7 points. The house of the moon has 3, which is low, and the house after 5, which is okay. So then you go look at Saturn's Binashtaka Varga to see if the moon can withstand the onslaught of Saturn. So there are 6. Saturn's not as strong in Sagittarius. 12th house has 7. Then 3 and 3. So it's a tie there. And then in the second house from the moon has 5, and Saturn is weaker with 4. So the tie is the tie is the weakest 2.5 years of the Binashtaka Varga. So if you see they're the same, or if this is 1 or more points lower then the transiting Saturn's house, then you'll be able to tell people which is the house that is most likely to have the most difficulties in the Sati Sati. It's not always death, but I've been asking clients this now since 1993 or something, and they all report almost across the board that those years that I ask, were these the hardest 2 years? And they always say yes. So Vinashaka Varga points below 4 is weak, 5 or above is strong, very weak is 0. So the Vinashaka Varga points in each sign will add up to the total Sarva Ashtaka Varga points for that sign. Now the house in play for you guys now, we're both Jupiter and Saturn aspect. For Aries, it's house 5, rising or moon. Taurus, house 4, Gemini, house 3, Cancer, house 2, Leo, house 1, Virgo, house 12, Libra, house 11, Scorpio, house 10, Sagittarius, house 9, Capricorn, house 8, Aquarius, house 7, and Pisces, house 6. When Jupiter moves to Virgo on December 3rd, 2016, Saturn and Jupiter will mutually aspect 2 houses instead of 1, Taurus and Capricorn. And my experience is it's always more intense when there's only 1 house in play like it is right now. So things won't be so dramatically black and white once you've got 2 houses in aspect. So thank you for attending, and I appreciate your time. And I'm ready for questions now.
Okay, Christina, we've got one question that's come in. It's slightly off topic, but I'll go ahead and read it.
Okay.
Over the next year, what can be expected in the area of marriage and relationships when Leo is in the 7th house from the moon, especially after January when Rahu transits Leo as well?
So the moon is in Aquarius?
I don't know. This is from,
read the question again.
over the next year, what can be expected in the area of marriage and relationships when Leo is the 7th house from the moon, especially after January when Rahu transits Leo?
Okay, well, that is a question that needs to have a reading really to answer it, because it's one thing to have Jupiter transiting 7th from the moon, but Jupiter transiting 7th from an Aquarius moon is a planet. It's ruler of the 2nd house and ruler of the 11th, which is 6 from the 6th. So Jupiter's not a good planet for Aquarius moon, unless there's something else in the chart, in the Vamsha chart, the relationship chart, where Jupiter is very beneficial, you see. And Rahu, when it joins Jupiter, Kodanda Rahu, I would suggest if they're thinking about relationships, they do it before that happens, because when the nodes are going 1 and 7 on your moon, then they will be K2 in the 1st and Rahu in the 7th. Rahu in the Upagrahas, shadow grabbers, right? It makes relationships shadowy, makes you unsure, and that yoga, Jupiter and Rahu together, Kodanda Rahu means big Rahu, there are other names for it. It is a material yoga. It's more for material success than it is. So some young person marrying some old guy for money, or a woman for money for that matter, some guy, that would be positive for that. But I would say wait until that transit moves off of the moon before you make permanent promises to someone. And that's just in general, because every chart's a snowflake, everybody's different. You really have to look at a lot of other factors to answer that succinctly. Saturn, on the other hand, is good for a Leo moon, Saturn going through the 7th, because it's Lord of the moon, Aquarius, aspecting the moon. And yet again, it's going through a Marka house. See, so there's these subtle, it's good, but it's not good. You know, it's good, but it's not totally good. So in order to know the total strength of good and bad, you have to look at lots of things, like how many Vinashaka Varga points is there in Leo. Leo is an enemy of Saturn. So Saturn aspecting that house, it's aspecting the house of an enemy, because Saturn is the son of the sun, the S-O-N of the S-U-N. And you'll see Galika in a lot of my charts. Galika is the son of Saturn. It's another upagraha that I use for research. So there was only one question?
No, we've got more now. We've had a request that you go back to the slide with the signs that are aspected by both Saturn and Jupiter.
Okay. Let's see. I'm happy to do that. That's my pretty one. This one?
I'm not sure. Brad, if you could post out if that's the slide you were looking for.
Hi, Brad. Here, Jupiter's
No,
in
he
Leo.
said it's a few slides before the end.
This one?
Well, Brad,
this one? Is it a chart or is it a text slide?
Hold on. He says a few more.
This is the last one.
Okay, well, Brad, this is going to be posted out on YouTube, so you'll be able to go back. Oh, he said that one. You'll be able to go back and take a look at this.
You can say stop at any point.
He says okay. He'll look at it on YouTube.
Okay.
The next
YouTube,
question is,
yes?
Is the Maraka planet from the moon more significant than the Maraka planet from the Lagna?
Depends. I would say that you have to weigh it all out. So let's just look at let's just look at any chart. Let's see. Let's just look at Marilyn Monroe's chart. Okay, so Marika means death. So the second house is America, and the seventh house is America, because the eighth house is death. So from Cancer rising, the eighth house is Aquarius, and the seventh is 12th, the house of loss. So here's the house of death, the planet house that's 12th from it, the seventh. That's why the seventh is America. The second is America because it's 12th from the third. So the eighth house, if you go to house 8 and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, the third house is 8th from the 8th. So it's a secondary marka because it like the seventh is just one step, 12th from the 8th. The third is 8th from the 8th. It's 2 steps, and then 12th from the third. So the second house is the lesser marka. The seventh house is the worst marka. Now, if you read it from the moon, you have a different set of markas, and so you have to look at the condition of the house. So the second from the moon has Jupiter and Mars. Well, Mars gets exalted in Capricorn, so Mars doesn't do poorly in a Saturn sign. And Jupiter, though, is debilitated in Capricorn, and so it's in a Saturn sign, so that's not as good. You look at Ashtaka Varga points, okay? So second from the moon is 31 points, okay? And then you look at the seventh house from the moon, the other marka, and it has 29 points. That's good. From the ascendant, the second house has 26, and the seventh house has 24, a little low. So you see the lowest points in Binashtaka Varga happen where the moon is, and she died when Saturn went over that moon in a house that had the lowest bindus by marka. Does that answer their question, I hope?
I hope so.
Okay, what's the next question?
Okay, let's see here. We've got so if I understand, Binashtaka Varga is used for Sati Sati calculation to tell which 2.5 years are the weakest?
That's when you can expect the most difficulties. It's not always death. It can be a tie, like in her case, there were 3 points in Marilyn Monroe's case, there were 3 points in the house where actual moon is and 3 points for Saturn, so it was a tie in her case. When Saturn went through Sagittarius, she had 7 points. So she did not pass away in this window. Saturn only had 6. She wins. The moon wins. The moon was able to withstand the onslaught of Saturn. When Saturn went through the tie house, that was not strong enough for her. And you go back to the low points in the first place. It's the second, it's the third lowest house. Anything below 25 is low. We like to see at least 25 for strength of the house, and that was the house of the mind. And we know both her mother and her grandmother had mental illness, bipolar, and they think she had that same condition. Let's see. I'm just looking to see. I don't think that would be as much for her. 22 points. Career cut short, yep. Low points in the 10th house of occupation. That's indicative of not a real long career. And she died pretty young.
Okay, we've got
Next
the
question.
Next question. It just says, if a sign has 40 points in Ashtaka Varga, and it also has a difficult planet like Rahu or Nietzsche Saturn.
Okay, so we're talking about Aries. Nietzsche means debilitated. Mm-hmm. So if a house has Saturn and Rahu, is that what the question is? Say it again.
Yeah, he's asking if a sign has 40 points in Ashtaka Varga and it also has a difficult planet like Rahu or Nietzsche Saturn. I guess he's asking what you can expect.
Okay, well, if Rahu is in Aries, Nietzsche Saturn means Saturn's in Aries. If Rahu is in Aries, that's considered good. Rahu's considered good in the fire signs, in Leo, in Sagittarius, and in Aries. When you think Rahu acts like Saturn, Aries is ruled by Mars, and Mars gets exalted in Saturn's sign. It's one of the reasons. There's reasons for each one of them. So Saturn with Rahu acts like Saturn, so it'll be like 2 Saturns. And you have to examine the 12 rules of Nichabanga Raja Yoga, the cancellation of debilitation, to answer that question properly. So you have to go through the chart and see if Saturn's in an angle from the rising sign of the moon, if Saturn is exalted in the Navamsha, if the lord of the Saturn in debilitation is Mars, and Mars is exalted in the Navamsha, if an exalted planet is aspecting, say Sun is in there too, exalted, or say, or in its own sign, some people say, if Venus is in Libra aspecting it, which would not be the case if the Sun was there, of course, because Venus is always within 60 degrees of the Sun. So there are quite a few rules for cancellation of debilitation. So when you're saying your Saturn's Nietzsche, you have to really make sure that it really is Nietzsche, and there's not something canceling it.
Okay. And
I think we could probably take maybe one more, then we'll close.
Okay.
We have to limit the time, everybody, because this is going to be put up on YouTube.
Okay. Next question. If Leo, 8th house, has Ashtaka Varga points of 25, will there be significant effect from Jupiter and Saturn? If so, what kind of effect?
So if Leo is the 8th house, then that means the rising is Capricorn, right? And so with Jupiter and Saturn both aspecting there, that's the Lord of the Lagna, Saturn in the 8th, and then it is the Lord of the 12th and the Lord of the 3rd in the 8th. I think that's okay, but once again, people are asking their natal chart questions, I'm sure, and that needs to be answered by looking at the Navamsha charts and the surrounding charts that have to do. I would be careful, stretch before you exercise, because that could cause Saturn rules bones, and Jupiter, all of the moisture in your body. I would be sure and do some stretching before I went running. You just can't randomly say a Saturn in the 8th is not considered really bad because it is the Karaka for the 8th house. The 8th house is the house of death. Saturn is the planet of death. And the Karaka rule is if the house for a thing is transited by the same thing, it denies the same thing. So, for instance, if Jupiter is the Karaka for children and Jupiter is in the 5th house at birth, then that can deny children because this is the house for children, 5, and Jupiter the planet for children. So if Saturn is transiting in the 8th house from Capricorn, that's the house of death and the planet of death, so it denies death. So it's more likely something to do with bones or muscles. And to watch out, once Mars in Cancer moves to Leo with the Saturn and Jupiter, then also Mars, who rules muscles, has moved in there. So I just watch the lower back, just a ballpark answer, but once again, you need to have an astrologer look at your chart.
Great. Well, Christina, thank you so much for answering all those questions.
It's my pleasure.
I'm going to change presenters, Christina, so I'll give you the
Okay,
notice.
how do I do that? Okay.
I'll make myself organizer.
Okay. Do I need to do anything?
No, we'd like to really thank you, Christina. That was an excellent job. It was really informative and really great summary knowledge that I think all of us can apply. I think with the use of computers, Vinashtagavarga and Samudaya Ashtagavarga are more easily applied. And I think you've given us some good examples of the value of using these tools to add another dimension of precision and depth in the reading. I really thought it was a great lecture and really appreciate you for offering your time for us here. So,
well, thank you. I'm sorry I had to go so fast, but I'm hoping everybody will go to YouTube and look at it, and then you can stop it and look at the screens and pause it and go back on.
Right. So it will probably be a few days before we post this to YouTube, but you'll be able to go back and review this. And we are going to be attempting to release maybe every month or two, offer free webinars on topics that are timely in Vedic astrology. So you can stay tuned. We'll be sending out news blasts and announcements and things like that. You can subscribe to the ACFA e-news, which is acfaonline.org/e-news, and you'll be given notice then of upcoming webinars. So thank you all for attending. It was a pleasure, and it was great, Christina, that you could share your knowledge with us. And I'd like to thank everybody, and we'll sign off from here.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.